On today's show, we are talking about the most common complaints we get from customers and the most common questions we get from security officers. Welcome to the Titan Protection Show. Welcome to the Titan Protection Show. I am Ryan Smith here with Chief of Security Josh Leon. And Josh, I know over the years you have managed thousands of security officers and talked with hundreds, if not thousands, of customers. And today I kind of wanted to touch base on, the common questions that we get from security officers and the common complaints we get from customers. If we start with the most common questions that security officers ask, we put them through a decent amount of training. They get out into the field. So let's not take it from day one. Let's take it from maybe our first week, our first month, and even our first year working as a security officer. What comes to mind that stands out the most?
It's changed over the years. Obviously, I try to be out every at least once or twice a week. This last 2 weeks, it's been much more frequent, seeing officers and customers. But it's definitely changed. It also can be the climate of the country, the climate of the community. For instance, COVID was a very, very different time of the kinds of questions we would get on the officers. When do I address mask usage? How do I address mask usage? Things like that. But I'll kick back to just the last couple weeks of what I'm seeing is the most common. The biggest one that I will have from an officer that I'm finding reoccurring, and it's a great one. It's a great question. An officer will be at a quiet post, something that doesn't have a ton of activity going on, and they'll ask, should I do a report? And what I always tell them is
like a daily activity report?
Just something of that, and what I always tell them is, I said, a report's never a bad thing. It's always a good thing. It shows the client we're working.
Unless we get into the routine of nothing to report.
Nothing to report. Yeah.
Right.
And that's when you go with those scavenger hunt type activities and stuff. You're looking for fire hazards, trip hazards, things like that. And you're putting those guys to work. Hey, our shift sergeants used to do it to us.
Right.
If we didn't have call load, they would say, hey, let's go get some activity going. Let's do it. Doesn't mean you got to go write a bunch of tickets or anything like that as law enforcement.
And it breaks the day up.
Absolutely.
At a quiet post, it's tough to just stand there and watch a clock tick.
I'll give credit where credit is due. A guy we both know, JP Thurlow, used to give us a directive of, hey, before you go get your first Diet Coke, before you go get your first coffee, go make a couple contacts first.
Right.
And that's kind of your reward after you do that. So I get that one a lot. Should I go ahead and write a report? Which the conversation we just had right here is exactly what I tell the officer. I say, yeah, but show some activity.
Right.
Don't not just a blank page with nothing to report on there. So that's a very, very common question. Another one is when you have a static officer, meaning the client's want is for you to be right at this one area. Are you sure I can't move around? Are you sure? And that's something we'll walk through with the client as well and things like that. Because if you're just standing in the same spot for 8, 10, 12 hours,
brutal.
It can be maddening.
Right.
Yeah. So,
well, I remember when I was still interviewing security officers, it seems like, you have a post like a retail store or a grocery store, and it's like, okay, all I have to do is stand there for 8 hours,
right.
And then you do it, and you're like,
that's a day.
It's tough because we used to work that off-duty gig,
yeah,
and you'd stand there at the front door right under a clock.
Are you talking about the popcorn joint?
Yes,
yeah.
And it was just brutal watching.
Do you remember? Didn't I get in trouble for boxing things up?
You ruined it
and
for
sweeping
everybody.
the floor.
Well, you were carrying popcorn to people's cars.
Yeah.
Well, and then I was working one day, and somebody brought a broom and stuck it, and I was like, I quit.
No, thank you.
Well, they were like, well, Leon did, and I was like, well, go. And I don't know, maybe there was a piece of that of, am I above that? But I was more of the mentality of, if I'm in the back sweeping up and this place gets robbed,
I'm not watching the security aspect of
it. Right.
Yeah.
And we run into that. Yes. I mean, that happens. We've had that where people have said, customers have said, do you mind if the security officer, if he's doing his round, sees a piece of trash and they pick it up? The problem and the challenge that presents is then that turns into an expectation. And they'll call and they'll go, well, the officers aren't picking trash up anymore. And it's like, okay,
we got out of that business. The other one that you and I ran into together was cart pushes, and the third was, do you remember the hotels that want us to deliver towels and things like that?
Yes.
Same thing. Same thing, that we want them to stick to security expectations.
And I don't want to derail us too far, but how do you feel about that? Because there's a thing about, and for your point, you at the popcorn place would grab the mop and do the different things out of boredom.
Yes.
You were trying to kill time.
Yes.
There's an aspect of that, but then from my perspective, it was like, okay, go mop. And so I put myself into security officers where it's like, okay, I could see some folks that are like, hey, I'm okay with anything that breaks up the monotony of just standing here, and others that may say, hey, I'm not, that's not my job, or that's not my role.
I think I very much so came over to your mindset, especially when I came over here full-time from law enforcement. I think because that is the liability that we're holding as security. We're not holding the liability of mopping.
What about the customer that is trying to dual purpose or steal budgets? Because we've had that too, where it's like, do we really need the day porter, walking around grabbing trash out of trash cans? Can we have the security officer do that as well? If the expectations are there or set up from the beginning, and they say, and I understand that if they're doing X, they're not going to be, the potential for something to happen. So we can't have
the conversation you and I had, and it was very, very organic, because we were a young, hungry company, and we didn't want to lose business, because we were going to say no to this one thing.
Right.
But the conversation you and I had that we had to get through as a company is, well, then we're not going to call them security officers. We're going to call them something else. Because the thing is when you wave that security banner, and we've learned this over the years, when you're waving that banner of "we are security," and then, like you said, you were mopping the floor and we got robbed out front here, now you have stepped into a whole new
I was
realm.
more so saying, if the customer is eyes wide open to that, and they say, we understand that if they're doing this, the potential for something bad to happen, and we're okay with that. We want to have the hybrid, and we're not going to, if something bad happens and they're actually doing the other task, whatever that may be, because we've had that happen. We've had customers that say, hey, can they help file this paperwork away, and all sorts of different stuff, because they may be sitting, their main function is greeting visitors or access control, but they do have idle time in between. And I don't know if there's one black and white answer to that. I think that's that
would be something that if we were going down that rabbit hole, I would probably partner with my direct boss, Kyle, or with you to say, we're going to be very, very meticulous in these. We are anyways, but in the design and the drafting of these post orders, language would be very, very specific in that, and very sensitive, because you're now telling somebody to juggle. You're telling them to juggle other expectations, not just the security one. It's not that it's a no. It's not that it's just this automatic no. I think that that's a discussion for post orders and a discussion with the client's expectations. Yeah. As far as other questions that I've noticed here lately, it's what you would think. It is random little uniform questions. Hey, did I get this right? I see a lot of that when I'll go to see an officer at post. In fact, Tommy and Todd are out seeing sites today. Okay. They're out hitting all our lead instructors are out seeing all of our officers today, and out seeing folks. And so that'll be one where Todd is going through, say, hey man, let me fix this on your uniform, an ID
belt
not being
keepers,
displayed, belt keepers, things like that.
When I first worked as a security officer, I got a duty belt and absolutely no training.
Yeah.
I had no idea what the belt keepers did.
Right.
I literally would just hook them around the outer belt, and then somebody, I think, saw them or showed me. But
which is what spawned you for us to do the video.
Right.
Yeah. And so what Todd does now is on Tuesdays, he'll say your homework is to watch that video. And when you come in uniform, I'm going to know who watched the video and who didn't. Right. And so that's how we fit. A lot of times the last thing our officers will get is their new boots and things like that, because they got to go purchase those. So I get a lot of footwear questions of, hey,
do I blouse them?
Do I blouse them? Do these look okay? Are these all right? Are these up to standard? Things like that. So that's a very big, just uniform and appearance is a big one. Sometimes the officers can be a little unclear on breaks because those change from post to post and things like that. Hey, I'm going to go over that. I had a Mariano, if you're listening, you were fantastic the other day when I stopped to see you. Mariano was out watching his, he was taking his break, but the break room at this current post actually gave him line of sight on the door,
nice.
and he just chose a really, really good area to take his break, and back to the wall, facing the door where something bad would start, and so little things like that. That's the most I get from security officers, or it's me adjusting it. So meaning I go to see a security officer, I'm out on field hits, and I see somebody with their back to the door or something like that. It's more of me hey, let me show you why I've got some concern here. So those are the most common. And then the other thing, because we are a remote workforce, when am I going to see you again? When am I going to see another supervisor again, and things like that? McFarland's out right now. We've always tried. Sometimes the office can anchor us here in dealing with fires and headaches, but we really try to get as many of our admin out to see folks as we can.
And that's crucial because the workforce is all remote. It's a very unique scenario to where, our workforce is deployed through a bunch of different sites where we're not at.
You got to be, real honest. We have a really neat first week. You feel part of a team.
And I was going to say, I think we do a pretty good job. I think we do much more than the industry standard as far as training and what 100%. We put them in a classroom and everything else. So I think we cover a lot of these things like, the things that I had no clue when I first started working, the belt keepers being one. Do I carry a round chambered in my firearm or do I not? I think there's things that we take for granted. And I want to speak to those officers that are out there that may not work for us directly. What are some of the things that, outside of, because there's a lot of that we cover in training. Yeah. But what are the big things that come up during training that might, and there's a lot of things we take for granted because we do it and we know, but the things, I keep going back to the belt keeper thing, but it's just such a great example of something you may never think of because you wear them every day. But
think of the topics. Think of the topics that you have chosen for this show, and it's a lot of those questions that we had as officers: how to write a report, how to get my uniform together properly, how to deal with a trespasser. Another big question that's never going to go away. When do I call the cops? When is it not my job anymore, and I call PD? Those things like that. I think you have used, and our staff has used those recurring questions as reason for content for the show.
Yes. One of the questions I had, and actually it was one I remember asking my training officer when I was at the police department, and I think it's even more prevalent in today's day and age is, I always wondered, like, if we roll up on a scene and there's people all around and I say, you need to go stand over there, what do I do if they say no?
Right.
And I remember the answer was kind of, at the time, it was like, what do you mean? They don't have, and I think nowadays, you have to look at that de-escalation, how you verbalize those things. The days of you're going to jail because you don't do what I say are different. You have to have command presence. You have to have some of that. And that's, we can stand around. We talked about how you can stand and it's pretty monotonous. And then all of a sudden something happens.
Right.
And all eyes are on you. Somebody's come and asked you, hey, can you make sure that person leaves? Or ask that person to leave or that type of thing. Do we get a bunch of questions that are situational based, or is it more
absolutely
functional, like how do I use my equipment or put my stuff on, or a lot of questions about how do I request time off? So aside from the administrative stuff of how to look at my schedule and how to do
the
that
one
stuff.
that you were just talking about, this will catch your ear too. I was teaching de-escalation on Saturday down at Independence CID. Well, a different CID from a different part of the city, downtown CID, actually sent a couple of their officers to the training I was putting on down for our clients down on the Independence CID. And so even though those gentlemen did not work for us, they caught me after teaching and they were like, thank you so much. I've been to your class before and it was good to get a refresher. I need to remind myself to use those other tools than you just got to leave or things like that.
And you gave a de-escalation training. What were the top 2 or 3 bullet points or takeaways? If you sum that up in 30 seconds or less, what's the high level?
The highest level would be understanding that people communicate in different ways with our bodies, with our words, and with our tone. And that also just that the barking dog of get off my property is not the way to go about things.
Right.
De-escalation can be used by all different kinds of entities. But for security officers, most of the time when we're going to run into escalation issues is when we're trying to get somebody off a property. It's our most common headache, and everybody knows that. And so it's just a reminder to those guys. And then we go back to that balance space and boundaries, space and time, and consequences as far as our de-escalation edict of allowing boundaries of saying, hey, you can't do this on the property. I'm going to give you a few minutes to think about this, and here's going to be the consequences. And it's usually going to be a call to the local police department. So we reiterate those when we're on. The other question just came into my mind is dealing with low-level theft. When we're seeing our retail officers I'll walk up and they'll say, hey, Chief, I just had a guy run out with a Mountain Dew. I don't know if I did the right thing. I remember Todd's training. I remember this, but it just felt wrong to let somebody run out with a Mountain Dew. And so I'll walk them through that and talk them through of why those are things we don't want to get wrapped up in, a lot of times anymore.
That's so tough.
It's a tough spot because the kid wants to do the right thing. And Todd will be in my ear when I'm critiquing a report where somebody did not respond to a low-level theft the way that I wanted. And Todd, he's really good about it. He'll say, Leon, man, remember, he didn't make it up. The person was stealing in front of him. He still wanted to do the right thing. And that it is tough, man. You and I have talked about that at so much length.
Well, to do this job, I think we're all wired with that shepherd gene to some degree.
Do the right thing.
Well, and it's good versus bad, and bad guys stole, and then it's really hard to think about the big picture and step back. And that's why I think giving some goalposts and the training is so important. And back to the de-escalation thing.
But that was also teaching us not to chase certain vehicles as cops.
Right.
That was, we had to learn that too, man. We used to go by a different set of rules, and the thing is that was telling, and we would be like, you remember us? We were young guys, and we were like, but they're getting away. I want to do the right thing.
Well, and I was thinking about this the other day about how people, officers, security officers, police officers, anything, they do want to chase bad guys. They do want to get in use of force incidents to some degree, but they want to do it under the right circumstances. They want it to be where they've done X, Y, and Z, and that gives me the green light to do it. They don't want to, hurt people or do bad things. They want the right set of scenario. And I think that's what we have to give them is the right criteria to either get involved or don't get involved.
The fork in the road for a retail security officer is this. When faced with a low-level theft, you can have a poor attitude and throw your hands up in the air and say, well, if you're not going to let me do anything, then I'm no better than the guy who's stocking shelves. What am I doing here? Or you can go the other direction and say, I'm going to play chess here. I'm going to get a good description. I'm going to get a description of the vehicle, and I'm going to let loss prevention get this person at a different date and time.
Right. And that's when when people, a customer calls me and says, hey, we had a cart full of groceries pushed out that weren't paid for. I immediately go back to what was the officer doing. If he was engaged, that doesn't mean do nothing and let the person walk by. We can still say, sir, ma'am, can I check your receipt, or you haven't paid for those, can you hang on? Now, if it's clear that's going to turn into a fight, the risk is not worth the reward. But if they're, how many folks, some will comply and some will go through that. But
it's really those questions, though. Am I responding properly? Am I doing enough administrative activity reports? And do I look okay? Do I look the way that you want me to look? And then back to what you just said, how do I request time off? How do I do things like that? It can be something that, hey, I haven't gotten my jacket yet. And those are ones where I just go right back to my truck. I get on the phone with April. I say, I'm at this post, this location with this officer. I need him to get a jacket. And it's a lot of just little turns of the screws and stuff.
One final thing I wanted to put on the de-escalation thing, because I do think from a question standpoint, it's something that comes up. The number one thing that's asked of security officers is to make contact with somebody and ask them to leave a property.
Usually, yeah.
And it's also the thing that they get no training on whatsoever. And I see two things happening. They either sink and do nothing because they're unsure of what to do or how to deal with it, or they get overly aggressive.
Yep.
And so I think that we use the training simulator and we try and put them in as many of those situations as possible. What we also talk about, and one of the things I think you would say in training is how we say things are sometimes much more important than what we say. And
100%.
you use the example of if you're on your way home and your wife's significant other sends you a text that says, bring home dinner, that's very different than the text that says, hey, honey, do you mind bringing dinner home on your, picking up dinner on your way home? And I think that's how we talk to people and how we address those things is expect the result. Because we can go, hey, get off the property and what are you doing and get out of here. That's probably not going to get somebody to go, okay, I will, or not fight or be calm.
But that used to be used, and we had to evolve. And the way I teach that in de-escalation...
Well, because the default was, then you're going to jail.
Right.
And that, I feel like those days are numbered.
Yeah, or if not over.
Right.
And the way we teach it to get everybody's light bulb to go on in de-escalation is this. I bring up my 6th grade teacher who was allowed to hit me with a board that said Board of Education on it as SWATs when we got in trouble. Can you imagine if that hit the news that an adult teacher was using blunt force trauma on a child of 11, 12 years old? It just wouldn't be. So
did you ever get swatted?
Oh, yeah, of course.
I did too. I had that same thing. I was talking about this over Thanksgiving, and people were like, what?
Yeah.
I was like, yeah. But now I went to grade school in rural Pennsylvania,
but
and each teacher was issued a paddle.
But, dude, when they started addressing, I think it's called corporal punishment back then, they sent a sign-off sheet home to my dad that said,
and they were like, no extra swats.
Is he allowed to be SWAT, to receive SWATs? I've never seen my father so happy. Yeah. He was like, "Oh yes," as kind of get this notarized. Yeah, is there a way for me to?
I know a kid that knew he was going Billy Simmons in 4th grade who got into a fight and knew he was going to get swatted the next day and wore like 10 pairs of underwear.
Oh, of course, yeah. Because that had to evolve. Just like our response as security officers to retail theft, to trespassing.
And is that good or bad? I mean, right? I mean,
I was going to say, I don't know if you want my answer. I think people...
Well, but let's look at it. We haven't been paddling kids in school for some time. Do we see a negative effect to that, to where they're turning into... That's a whole can of worms.
That's a can of worms.
Well, and I don't want to go down the generational thing because I have a different feeling. Our generation, it was always, every generation's always like, that generation's lazy. They don't do this, that. But
I agree.
They all seem to figure it out and get it. I mean, we were that. Television's going to rot your brain and everything. Yep. And this generates the phones and
the internet. Yeah. Everybody has to go through those seasons, and we're in one of those seasons. We're in one of those seasons of
it's a
culture
change
and and reshuffling of priorities. And the priority now is not immediate response and discipline of the child. The priority now is the child's feelings and overall.
But think about what's happening in the industry. I mean, when we started, we were one of the security companies that really focused on training and a little bit more than what the observe and report model was. Now we have customers.
You're very much undercutting us with a little bit more compared to the industry standard. Because I remember my training as a security officer, it was nothing.
I didn't even get trained.
Yeah, it was nothing. Dude.
Well, but now that police resources are slim, we're seeing a lot more demand from customers. And the buzzword I'm hearing around the industry is we're transitioning from observe and report to observe and respond. So more is being asked of security officers, which I think speaks for training and everything else. But it's just a different. So it's a tough needle to thread because the customer base is going to be asking more, but they're also putting pressure on de-escalation, and I think that may be the more. I mean, they're not saying beat this person down and throw them in handcuffs. No. It's just more than just stand there and watch. And that may be having a conversation and sharpening our communication skills more than it is sharpening our defensive tactics.
Right, and as Major McFarland and Instructor Schatzel and Instructor Sparks are out seeing folks today, those are the scenarios I want them working through with those guys, and to say, hey, have you had a low-level theft? How'd it go? How'd you respond? And things like that, because it really is, bringing us back full circle to the questions we normally get from officers in the field. It's, do I look right? Am I doing the right things administratively? And how do I respond properly to these types of incidents?
Right.
Yeah.
So, and if anybody has any questions out there if you're a security officer and you have questions, love to hear it. I don't know if we touched on the majority of what folks have on their mind or asking, but if there's anything else out there, glad to answer or use in future shows. Switching to the customer side of things, I'm going to guess. I think phone usage
used to be.
And when you say used to it, well, go ahead. What are your top? What do you field the most from customers as far as?
It used to 100% be phone usage. We changed the way that we trained it. It used to be completely stay off your phone. Completely stay off your phone. And
I just want to earmark one thing. This is a new scenario. We had flip phones and not even cell phones when we were doing this gig, so we didn't have the distraction of.
Right.
Now it's constant. It's who can't not look at their phone for an hour or so.
Yeah,
it's a different scenario.
It has changed. In fact, when I first started teaching for Titan, it was stay off your phones unless it's an absolute emergency. And what we had to realize that phones are so ingrained into our culture now that we started training it differently. And that's what I tell the clients when they say, "Hey, your officer's on the phone." Okay, how much was he on his phone? And the way it's trained now with Sparks is a quick look is okay, being buried is not. And once I started verbalizing that to the clients, those complaints dropped some. And what I mean by that is the initial complaint, it probably was a lot of times just an officer doing a quick check, then putting it back in his pocket, but they were still complaining about that level of usage. Now I usually only receive complaints if somebody's really buried in. So it's gone down, but our tolerance for phone usage went up. So
and a check is different than, and I'm a big advocate of, if it allows, if the post allows, if the customer allows, give us a solid 50 minutes every hour and then take 5-10 minutes to do what you got to do on your phone, check things, respond to things. I think it's a bad look when you are, and I think it's most prevalent in retail where they're a deterrent and they're kind of standing there and doing it, because it's if somebody is buried in their phone, appearance is everything. And I'm a big fan of if people are coming in, make eye contact. Hey, how are you doing? And that's a very different look than walking by somebody who's got their phone. And they didn't see you, they have no clue, and they're not paying attention.
I think it's also back to everything's fine till it's not. Meaning a 30-second check of your phones probably doesn't seem like a big deal until somebody goes running out in front of you during that 30-second check of your phone with an item. And so everything's fine till it's not. And people don't call security officers for good news. It's pretty rare. And so the thing is we have to be diligent. We have to keep after it. It is not a problem us or any industry is ever going to fully solve. You have to manage.
Well, but think of it now. Now all the guard management, you're writing your reports, you're checking post orders.
So the way we train that, you're right. So the way that we train that, and that's another question. Hey, I need to write a report, The very first thing I say is be transparent, find a manager and say, "Hey, Manager Smith, I'm going to write this report on my phone. You might see me on my phone a little more than normal." And I actually train it differently than that as well, or that coincides with that. I'll say, if you've got a sick kid, but you made it to work for us and you need to check on your son or your daughter or whoever more, go tell the manager.
Right.
Because they have kids too. They have family too. And say, or you have a relative in the hospital.
It just can't be all the time. That's got to be that, it's not, okay, every day something's happening.
Yeah, no, it's a one-off, and it's one of those things too, we just want to be transparent about it. The number one client.
What about this question? I'm standing on post. I want to put one AirPod in and listen to a podcast while I'm standing there. I've got the transparency on. I can hear. I'm still doing good, and
that's always been left up to our clients. I just was at a bill rate increase meeting less than an hour and a half ago with that client who would have been absolutely fine with that, 100%. I have other clients that are not okay with that.
Right.
That really is a case-by-case scenario for us. That makes it tough because if I'm working at this place that is cool with it, but then I go pick up a shift at this place that's not, it throws a curveball at us. But there again, us, we always come back to, hey, what do your post orders ask of you? What is the client asking of you? And we also have kind of this unwritten rule that we teach in class, and it is, if the client is asking us to do something that is not illegal, immoral, or unethical, then go ahead and do it. But if we felt like that was out of the security realm or whatever, then bring it up with your supervisors. And we'll address it from there. But the number one client complaint that I get these days is simply bad customer service, a little bit of rude behavior and things like that. I think that is all industries. I was having drinks with some friends the other day, and we just had the highest level of customer service from the server. Just fantastic. It's almost shocking sometimes how
Right.
when you see somebody who's really, really good at it compared to what you're used to, it will actually catch you off guard.
Right.
And so we as a society, I think, and as a culture, I hope we get better at it because, good behavior should not be a shock.
Right.
It should be the norm. And the thing is that's what I expect of our officers. I want good, solid behavior.
Well, and we get to, it's equal parts folks that are really engaged and want to do a good job and want to use this as a career. And that's what I'd like to see out of the industry is better pay, better training, better career as a whole. You go overseas, security is a career for folks, and it's a different. So we get a mix of people that are really good and want to move up and engage, and then other people that are just punching a clock and they could care less.
Yeah, and the thing of it is I've gotten officer complaints from a trespassing subject where he goes, yeah, I was trespassing, but I want to talk to you.
But they didn't talk to me right.
That's exactly right. And I will walk that horse to water.
That's the pickup dinner versus honey, do you mind grabbing dinner on your way home?
I will walk that horse to water where the person calling the complaint on my officer will say, oh, yeah, I was trespassing.
Right.
I absolutely was violating the law, violating the policy of that property, but I want to be talked to nicer.
But I will say that is the difference between that person leaving and not leaving.
True.
Sometimes you can treat somebody like shit and they're going to be like, I'm not going anywhere.
Absolutely
or it turns into a fight or something else. That may be the difference of that service level you were talking about. That may be the difference of them going, okay, I'll leave and being the end of the incident. And that's ultimately what we're hoping for. Customer service, phones. What else do we got? Appearance?
Late to post.
Late.
Appearance, not as bad on appearance, but I think our field hits have helped with that.
And what are the appearance things? Is it your shirt's not tucked in, it's wrinkly, it looks like crap, clean shaven,
they don't
dirty?
worry about that as much anymore.
Smelly?
Yeah, and that happens. We've done a video on that. Yeah, that happens. Actually, the number 2 I would probably put these days, it wouldn't be appearance. I actually would put that your officer is talking too much with my staff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that would probably
And that's a tough one to give because we've had an officer where
I just got done complaining to you about customer service.
Right.
And here's our officer being a nice, jovial person with the staff, and now he's in trouble for that.
That one's been one that's tough.
It's
because
tough.
you can't, you almost have to customize that to the person because if you've got somebody that's a talker, they may not realize that the other person's not interested in the conversation. And then the other side is you're standing out there at a post and you're, not much is going on. You want to talk to somebody and you want to go, but you're pulling them away from their job, and that drives.
And you and I have talked about it 100
crazy.
times. We have one veteran officer who works for us. He does a fantastic job. One of our most beloved officers by his current client, and we corrected him years ago about talking to somebody.
Well, we put a blanket. They said just in general, the officers are talking to the cashiers a bit too much,
right?
And we put something out that says, "Hey, limit the talk." And yes, he was too black and white.
He said,
Somebody came up and said,
you.
hi. And he said, I can't talk to you.
I can't talk to you.
Very robotic and not like, and that's not what we're going for, but
No.
that's a prime example of like, how do you give direction on that piece to where it's
The
like.
way that it's taught is we always say, weather comments are great. Did you catch the Chiefs game is great. All things like that. And then let the person pass where their management notices is when we have stopped that employee
from doing their job.
Perfect.
Yeah.
From getting their stuff done. Yeah.
Right.
And so that's where it can come to bite us. And you know what? For the most part, our clients are very they show a lot of grace when they call me about that stuff. They'll say, "Hey, listen, this is going to sound like I'm being a jerk, but we need we need them to allow our employees to do their jobs." Hell, boss, you've told us. We have a lot of fun in the office. Because that's a high pressure office and stuff like that. So there's a lot of pressure release, but there's a balance of we also have to get people got to get their jobs done. They have to get it done.
And there's a piece. I think customers, they want a consistent officer that is not constantly being retrained on the nuances of the post.
Yep.
They do like people that, hey, this person, they really know our employees. They're great. They get along with everybody. That's a very delicate balance between being personable, and being annoying.
That is our edict, and you and I created that. And one of the things that we created was this: the national edict with the security officer who's annoying the client is you remove them.
Right.
And we changed that. What we went with is, hey, do you like him? Because that will actually catch our clients off guard. Oh, well, yeah, I like him. He's just talking to my employees a little too much. And we say, let us fix him. That way we're not going through the removal and then retraining and stuff like that.
Well, because normally that won't get you fired. That'll get you moved. But the thing I don't like about that is then you end up with two pissed off customers.
That's exactly
because
right.
you just move that person to another post
Let's
where they
go
do the
fix
same thing. So if we fix it and we get it there for sure, it's much better
and
it gives an opportunity to address it.
If an NFL linebacker who was drafted in the first round is making this many millions of dollars a year has to go sit with the coach on how to take an angle on a tackle better, then our officers need to have their ears open on being able to be coached with us on how to have a more successful shift.
Right. And I think that dynamic ranges from security officer to police officer to anything. There are just some people that are talkers that need that. They get that energy from other people and they need to, and so I think those are few and far between as far as, personality types. But anything else that sticks out of your mind as stuff that you feel from?
Yeah, those, and then what hey, they're a little bit late a couple times a week as far as the customer complaints.
Normally people that are late are chronically late.
Yes, yeah, but the two prevalent ones, what I would say, hey, we could use a little bit more customer service, a little bit more sugar than poison on this, and then the talking with employees and stuff. Those would be the two biggest that I see a lot of times. The third, I would put if the officer has the ability to sit at their post, sometimes the client will get a little uncomfortable that they're sitting too much and they're going to miss something.
Right.
Things like that. But it's like I said, it's not lying, cheating, and stealing. It's little turns that we got to make.
Right. Well, hopefully you found that valuable. If anybody's got any other items that we didn't cover on there, love to hear about them. But that's our 2 cents. Appreciate you guys listening. We'll catch you next time.
Catch you next time.